This question is for Congressman Johnson. Last week, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was talking to a Air Force college in Alabama and said Iraq has not been on, quote, a steady, smooth glide path. When the president rearranged his staff, why didn't he rearrange the Secretary of Defense, and why hasn't anyone called for Rumsfeld to resign?
Well, directly to that point, because I think it would be destabilizing to facing the complex problems in Iraq, which are extremely important to our future and important to the future of world peace and the effort by the community of nations to turn back the power of terrorist networks. Also, Rumsfeld has done some important work on reorganizing the forces, creating the special forces, changing the way we manage conflict, and for that he's earned the enmity of some of the established brass, but we have a ways to go. So I don't want him to be the issue. The real issue is, what do we do about Iraq? And what we do about Iraq is to put a great deal more pressure on the government to stand up their forces and their police and their government. They're the ones that have to take control of the sectarian violence that is killing so many and is a daily tragedy in our lives and theirs. They can do that. We have to motivate them to do that. We have to help them find new strategies to do that. And you see that going on right now. You also are probably aware of the Baker-Hamilton Commission that will again bring new ideas onto the table since the current ones are not doing well. And I think the next step is to bring the nations of the Arab world, of the Middle East, in on the issue of how do we create stability. Ultimately, if all else fails, we'll have to go to a looser federalist system that allows each region to have more autonomy. Because after all, the Kurds have a thriving economy, and they don't have terrorism, and they're Iraqis. So it can be done. We have to help it happen. The one thing we can't allow to happen is we cannot allow Iraq to become a training ground for al-Qaeda, and the Iraqi economy to become a money pot for al-Qaeda. That would be catastrophic. We can prevent that from happening, and it's our job to prevent that from happening.
Thank you. I've heard Congressman Johnson say a couple times that removing Rumsfeld would be detrimental because it would destabilize things. Well, we need to do something to destabilize Bush's strategy in Iraq. We need to do it pretty quickly. And this idea that the strategy going forward should be putting more pressure on the government, I mean, that's just sort of a little bit longer way of saying we should stay the course, because that's what this administration and members of Congress have been saying for years. More pressure on the government to take control of their own future. More pressure on the government. You say that enough times, you hope that maybe it comes true, and yet things get worse by the day on the ground in Iraq. The truth of the situation is that, as so many Republicans and Democrats are realizing, the Iraqis are not going to stand up for themselves until they have some sense of when that time is going to be. Now, I don't think you set that timetable in the course of a political debate, but I think that that's a conversation that should be occurring. And the last thing to say is this. The cat's already out of the bag when it comes to Iraq being a training ground for terrorists throughout this world. And that's not me saying it. That's the 16 most respected intelligence agencies in this country have said it. That this has become what they call the cause célèbre for the terrorist movement around the world. It's too late, and we in part have created that breeding ground and that training ground for terrorists by our actions there and by our very poor decision to not put enough resources and troops into that country when we first made the decision to go in. So a new Congress has to hold this president accountable. I mean, that's what it comes back to. This Congress has abdicated its responsibility to check this president on Iraq. And you better believe that I will be part of a Congress that will start to set a new course.